So what do you think of when you hear the words science fiction? I bet it's stuff like spaceships and aliens, right? Well, one of the greatest minds in the genre, the one and only Isaac Asimov, had a way deeper and honestly a much more surprising definition. We're about to dive into his ideas on where sci-fi really comes from and what it actually tells us about ourselves. Here's a fun one for you. What do flying carpets and spaceships have in common? I know it sounds like a weird riddle, but this question, it gets right to the very heart of what Isaac Asimov was trying to say about storytelling. The connection between that piece of magic and a starship is probably not what you're thinking, but it's the key to understanding this whole genre. All right, first up, Asimov makes this really bold claim. He says that even though we've been telling fantastical stories forever, what we actually call science fiction is, well, it's a pretty modern invention. It's a new thing in the grand scheme of how we tell stories. And look how specific he is here. He literally draws a line in the sand. He's arguing that the genre isn't thousands of years old, growing out of ancient myths. Nope. He thinks it was born from a very specific and pretty recent moment in our history. And this right here is the core of it all. Asimov believed that science fiction couldn't even exist until we, as a species, came up with a brand new idea, the belief that the future was going to be completely different from the present, and that science and technology were the engines making it all happen. Think about it. Before the 1800s, life changed so slowly that your great-grandkids were probably going to live a life almost exactly like yours. But then, bang, the Industrial Revolution. It changed everything. For the very first time, people could actually see the world transforming right before their eyes, within their own lifetime. And that feeling, that sense of constant, fast-paced, tech-driven change, that's the soil where science fiction planted its roots. Okay, but that brings up a pretty big question, doesn't it? If we humans have this universal need for strange and wonderful stories, what were we doing before science came along to explain all the impossible stuff? And Asimov's answer is simple, really. For thousands of years, something else was filling that exact same role. The world of myths, legends, and good old-fashioned magic. At their core, they're driven by the exact same thing. It doesn't matter if it's a Greek hero riding a winged horse or a starship captain hitting warp drive. Both of those stories are scratching the same deep human itch for a sense of awe, for wonder. Let's break it down. For example, that ancient dream of flying? It was imagined through the magic of something like Pegasus, the winged horse. Today, we satisfy that same desire with the science of a jet engine. See the parallel? What about seeing and hearing things from really far away? Well, ancient legends gave us magic crystal balls. Today, we have the scientific reality of TV and smartphones. It's the same end goal, just a different, let's call it an operating system. And who wouldn't want to open a giant stone door just by saying a magic phrase? Open Sesame is basically the magical ancestor of clicking a button on your garage door opener. It's all about the same thing, wanting effortless control over the world around us. Okay, so if they both satisfy that same need for wonder, what actually makes them different? Why isn't a story about a flying carpet considered science fiction? Well, according to Asimov, the difference is the most important part. It all comes down to the rules of the universe the story is set in. This gets to the absolute heart of it. The universe of myth is run by whims, by gods and demons who can change their minds. You can try to bargain with them using prayers or magic, but the science fiction universe, it's governed by cold, hard, unchangeable laws. You can't just pray for gravity to turn off for a bit. You have to understand gravity to build a rocket that can overcome it. That's the key. And once you realize that, it completely changes how you define the whole genre. Suddenly, it's not about the laser guns or the little green men. It's about something much, much bigger. This brings us to Asimov's most brilliant insight. Science fiction isn't a what, it's a where. The story itself can be anything, a romance, a mystery, an adventure. It's the background, a universe that runs on scientific principles. That makes it science fiction. You see, a story about a baseball game isn't sci-fi. But what if that game is played in zero gravity on a space station with gas guns? Suddenly, it's a sports story set against a science fiction background. A jungle adventure on Earth is just that, an adventure story. But put that same story on a planet with a toxic atmosphere and alien predators, the genre flips. The background really is everything. So, for the ultimate test of this background theory, Asimov looked at a genre that has some very, very strict rules: the mystery. A famous editor, John W. Campbell, argued it was impossible. He said, no way. He thought that in a sci-fi story, the author could just invent some new gadget at the last minute to solve the crime, which is basically cheating the reader. And you know what? It sounds like a fair point. How can you play detective if the killer can just teleport away? But Asimov was like, hold on. And he laid out a really simple solution. He said, it doesn't matter if your world has telepathy or spaceships. As the writer, your job is just to explain the rules of that world to the reader up front. You establish the boundaries. You say what's possible and what's not. And then you just play fair within those rules. You share every single clue. The setting, the tech, all that can be totally wild and out there. But that basic agreement between the writer and the reader, that promise to play the mystery game fairly, that stays exactly the same. It's unbreakable. And he didn't just talk about it, he went out and proved it. He wrote these classic robot mysteries like The Caves of Steel and The Naked Sun specifically to show his editor that it could be done. And by doing that, he showed everyone just how powerful and flexible science fiction could be as a literary background. So we'll leave you with this thought. Asimov created this beautiful connection between the magic of our past and the science of his time. It really makes you wonder, what parts of our world today, things we totally take for granted, like talking to anyone on the planet instantly, or AI, what will those things look like to people 1,000 years from now? Is it possible that our science will be their magic?